Welcome to Extraterrestrial Reality. Today we have a special guest with us. It's Marvin Jacobs. He's a retired Marine Corps vet, and he has had experiences with apparent alien beings since the 1960s. But more recently, events in the world, unfolding in the world, has made him think about something very strange that happened to him in 1986 while he was stationed in Southern California at a military base. And he reached out to me to talk about these experiences, and he's going to tell us all about everything that's happened to him and what he sees now as might have been some sort of a prediction he might have been seeing, a vision of what may be to come. And he was shown something in 1986 while in the presence of these apparent extraterrestrial beings. And now he's wondering, with the way things are going in the world, if maybe that was a portend of things to come. So I want to say thanks a lot, Marvin, for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it. And I think your story sounds, it's scary, it's amazing, and it's something that we should be thinking about, I guess. And so let's start off, I guess. Well, you know, you said these experiences started back in the 1960s for you.
Yes, that's correct. I was about 5 years old, and initially I thought these were just dreams. Floating up out of my bed, you know, at my feet, I could see these. They look like children, but you know, I know now they're what people describe as these graves. And I wasn't afraid because I thought these were dreams, and they would float me right through the wall of my room. I would brace myself, you know, thinking I'm gonna hit the wall and fall down and float right through it. And then I began to float up to the point where I could see the roof of my house, the roof of the building across the street, and I would always float into a cloud, and then I would lose consciousness. And my next memory, I'd be coming out of this cloud. It'd be just the reverse, being floated back down, go right through the wall of my bedroom, and then when I got over my bed, a foot or so, whatever was controlling me was cut off, and I would drop into my bed, jumping up, screaming. You know, to the point where my parents would come in and see what was going on. And this happened a couple times a week initially. It was crazy.
And this was when you were five years old, 6 years old, around that time, right?
5, 6 years old, yeah.
And so you don't have any, did you see any beings during those initial times, or it was just the floating out of the room and seeing the cloud, and then you're going unconscious?
Well, I would see them toward my feet, but when I got outside, I'd be, you know, I'm floating up. So I'd be looking up, and I would always lose consciousness when I went into this cloud. But, you know, even at that young age, it happens so often that I began to tell myself I would fight that urge to lose consciousness, you know, to see what was, and I was successful at it. And after maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 times, I could fight off that urge to lose consciousness. And when I did that, I could see that there was an object inside this cloud. A disc-shaped object inside the cloud, and I got to the point where I would go right inside a circle in the bottom of this cloud, and standing around that entrance would be these small grays. But the first time I was able to stay conscious, I saw a very tall gray, you know, 6 feet tall or so. But then I would lose consciousness, and I couldn't, you know, I would just lose consciousness, and then it would repeat itself. I would come out of this craft and be floated right back to my room.
And you were at the time you were in a room with you. Did you have brothers in that same bedroom with you? Did they?
Yes, I shared a room with 2 brothers, and apparently they didn't know. You know, no one knew this was going on. The odd thing was when I was floated back and dropped back in bed, within 30 minutes or so, my dad would be getting up to go to work, and he normally got up around 4:30, 5 o'clock. So that told me that whatever was going on took hours to unfold, whatever was going on.
So what time at night would it start, you would think, earlier in the night, and then and that's how you're able to ascertain that it was out several hours later?
You know, as a kid, we were in bed 8:30, so it's hard to say when it started, but I would guess, around midnight or so. As best as I can recollect, 3-4 hours, I'd be gone.
And then there were other things that happened too when you were younger. Beyond after that, there was some other encounters, and had no idea at the time that there was about. You didn't think about aliens. You just thought, you were thinking it was all dreams.
Exactly. When I was in 1965, 66, there were no grays. I didn't know. I'm as a kid anyway. But I never saw a movie or comic books with grays. So again, I thought these were dreams, but they were happening a couple times a week. So I began to suspect that they weren't. But then one event that they allowed me, I guess, to stay awake. And I went through the bottom of this craft, and that tall gray was there. And I knew that they would let me look around. So I actually went down this winding corridor, and there was a compartment, and it had other beings in it. And it was two human beings there, but there was some other beings who were not grays. And I didn't realize at the time, but they were not allowed to leave. There were two human beings there talking, and I was listening to the conversation they were having.
And what did these human beings look like?
It was one guy was a white guy, and he was very old to me. It's kind of hard to judge that when you're a kid, but he looked 70. Had on a plaid shirt. He kind of gave me the impression that he was maybe a farmer or somebody who lived in a rural area. But the other guy was black, African American, much younger, perhaps in his early 20s, and very muscular, not like a bodybuilder, but like a gymnast. And they were discussing, the older gentleman was extremely afraid. They were talking about escaping. And the young guy was telling them, there is no way out of here. He said, I've been here I remember the conversation almost verbatim. He said, I've been here a long time, and you're not going to leave here unless they let you leave. But then the black guy says something I didn't understand at the time. He said, to try to escape will be an act of futility. And I think I was 5 then. As a 5-year-old, I had no idea what the word futility meant. It wasn't 2 years later that I realized what he was saying.
Wow. And you said it wasn't just humans in this room. There was other things in this room, other beings.
Yeah, it was two beings. They looked just like a white porous mass or a globular mass. It's kind of hard to describe them. And they were very afraid, but they weren't saying anything, but they were listening to these human, I'm assuming they're humans. And, and I'm just watching all this, but there was another being there. Because to the left of where I was standing, there were like iron cots. One was like a bunk bed, no mattress, just metal cot. And I noticed there was something on the top of the cot because I saw some movement out of the left side of my eye. So I went over there as a little kid would, curious, and I climbed up the back of this double cot to see what it was. And it was, without a doubt, the most horrible thing I've ever seen. In fact, when I saw it, I jumped down and ran screaming out of that compartment. And that tall gray was waiting there looking at me. And the next thing I knew, I was back in bed, crying, sweating.
Wow. And so you think, looking back at that encounter now, what do you think was going on? Do you think that it wasn't just you and a couple other humans as prisoners or temporary prisoners or whatever, but other things were there too? You think might have been prisoners, perhaps?
I only looked in that one compartment, and they were not allowed to leave. And the odd thing was, I had no fear or no concern that they would not allow me to leave. I knew that they would send me back. So I don't know where these guys came from or what, why were they there? I didn't even know why they were coming for me. As a little kid, there was nothing I could tell non-human intelligence. I didn't know anything. So I've often wondered, was I there for some genetic reason? I do know that they would oftentimes, that tall gray would just look at me very close and just stare at me. But I don't know what the purpose of that was.
And so these incidences that took place during your childhood, was that the end of it then after that, or did that continue for a number of years?
Well, initially they were happening perhaps twice a week, but then it went down to probably twice a month, once a month. There is one time though that they came, and I had a younger brother. He's still with me. That was sleeping in another room, and they came into the house, but they went to him, and they were doing something to his nose, and I remember he twitched, and it made his nose bleed. That morning his nose bled really bad. My mother was tending to it, but it was bleed, and she didn't know what happened. He didn't know what happened, and it was odd that brother of mine, after that, he had this pathological fear of cats, and I often wondered. I think it was because of the eyes that these grays have. Somehow the eyes of a cat reminded him of that. I mean, he'd see a cat and he would just lose it.
And when did that happen? When did that incident happen?
I think I was about 7, and he's 2 years younger than me.
And they were in their bedroom when this was happening, or was this on?
No, they were in the house. He was in another room. And somehow I just knew they were there. So I got out of bed and walked down the hall to where he was sleeping, and they were there, and I was just looking at them because I didn't know what they were doing. And they were doing something to his nose, and it looked like he twitched or something, and it made his nose bleed really bad.
Now, did you talk to your mom or anybody else about this back in that time? Did you bring it up?
Yes, I did, because I have a large family. It was 9 of us in that building. But I went to my mother after the second or third time, and I mentioned this to her, that this was, I was having these dreams. And then I told about, I was seeing these creatures. And, she initially told me it was a dream, but then she became somewhat angry when I brought it up. And I didn't understand. I had a very loving mother, Choctaw Indian. Now, I can tell you, when she lived to be 97, she died about 4 months ago.
I'm sorry.
But when she was about in her 70s, and I'm just putting this together because I was trying to add all this up. When she was about 70, she began having pain in her knee, in her ankle, right ankle. So she went to the doctor. He took x-rays. He comes back in, and my mother's telling me this. He comes back in the room, and he says, "When did you have your surgery?" And she says, "I've never had surgery on my ankle." He said, "Well, you did." She said, "Sir, I've never had surgery on my ankle." He said, "Well, you must have stepped on like a long sewing needle." And she said, "I've never stepped on a sewing needle. If I did that, I would know it." So he showed her the x-ray, and it showed a pin. She says about 2 inches long in her ankle. And she didn't know how it ever got there. So they did surgery and removed it. And he actually gave it to her in a medicine bottle. So when she told me this, I asked her for it. And she said that her mother, my grandmother, told her to throw it away. And she threw it away.
Whoa. Wow.
Yeah, so I'm thinking my mother, because my wife told me, I would speak to her about this. And I would say, I didn't understand why mom was so angry. And she said, perhaps your mother was an abductee also. And she thought perhaps it was over. And now her son is telling her they're coming to me.
So that object that got thrown out could have been an alien implant. That's what it sounds like.
That's what I think. Yeah, because she didn't step on a needle. She said she never had surgery, but it was in her ankle.
Now, did anyone else in your family have encounters? You think? Did you ever talk to your dad about it at the time, or your other brothers? Did you ever discuss this with them?
Well, actually, the rest of the family, they didn't believe that I was having these events. I believe they knew I wasn't lying, but they had no basis of relating to this at all. Now, one brother, Paul, he's deceased, was a school teacher. He became real smart. He never denied the reality of it. He's very analytical. He didn't understand it, but he never denied that it was a real event.
I think a lot of people don't like to talk about it. Actually, it seems like some people that weird things happen to. I've run into a couple of them, people who have had weird things happen to them like this, but they don't want to even think about it. So,
right. I think for a lot of people, especially my family members, it disturbs their worldview, and they're comfortable believing what they believe.
Yes.
But I've spoken of this all my life, and I know they wonder. He was bringing this to us when he was a little kid.
So, okay, now let's fast forward a little bit. Now you're having these experiences when you were a child, and you grew up. Did it always continue, or was it always something that happened, or was there a period of time where it seemed like you were free of this?
There was a period of time when I thought that it was over. I was having this, then once a month or so. Then there were years that, because I joined the Marines at 17, right out of high school, graduated early, and I was in California 17. So I'd kind of put it behind me at that point until 1986.
And that's when you had this other experience, which is this is the one where
Yeah.
things really got weird.
Yeah, I was in base housing. I was married, not my current wife at the time, no children, love living in Southern California.
And what was the
So I
Marine
go to
base you
bed,
were at? What was the base you were at the time?
Marine Corps Air Station, Tustin, California. I was attached to Air Group 16.
And what was your rank at that time?
I was a staff sergeant. My MOS was 6672, which is aircraft maintenance and logistics.
And you were at the base and you were living there with your wife, and did you have children at the time?
No children. Never had children with her. Just living, working, and lots of friends, really enjoying my time in the Marines at that time.
And then something happened, and you had all of a sudden, after years of nothing happening, they returned.
I wake up in bed. I kind of sense someone was in my house, but base is very secure, so I wasn't very concerned. And I sit up in bed, and I lose consciousness. And in a second, I am in this cavernous space. I mean, it looked like a underground cave, but it was massive. Looked like perhaps a football field, the size of a football field. I looked, it's very damp. There was dim lighting, but I didn't see any lights. I look to my left and I see people, adults, children, in groups of maybe 3 or 5 against the wall to my left. And with every group, there's a grave. And these people are static. They're not moving at all. And it might have been, I don't know, 10, 12 groups of these people. Then to the right, to the left of me, there's a grave. And they grab me by my arms and walk me forward to like a movie screen, but it's just suspended in the air. I'm looking to see what's holding it up, but nothing is, just suspended there. And when I get there, it's almost like a platform. There's perhaps 8 graves to the right of them, smaller graves, and they're all looking at my temporal lobe. They're not looking at this movie screen. Well, a movie pops on, and it's a scene of people walking around, a normal scene, and then overhead there are aircraft, like bombers. And I thought they kind of set this up for me because I was in the aviation field, and maybe it was something I could relate to. And these aircraft are German aircraft. And I could actually hear the pilots talking, and they're bombing America. And they're saying it's time for you to, this is your payback. And it was really strange. And I turned to the grave, which is the leader to my right. And I said, what is this? I said, Germany is an American ally. So whatever you're showing me this for doesn't make any sense. And they didn't respond. And they're bombing America. It was the craziest thing. And they actually bombed to the point where it was a world war. And the next scene that I'm looking at is the Earth. And I hear this voice say that it's over. The world is over. The world is dead. And I began to cry. It was just horrific. And I'm crying. And then the next thing I know, I'm back in bed and the sun's coming up. And a very strange thing happened then. I heard in my head, and it's kind of odd because I heard this in my head, but it was very loud, louder than it needed to be. I heard these words and they said, start your wife. And I knew what that meant to wake her up. And I shook her and she woke up. I was disheveled, but she went on with her day. And I was outdone. I mean, I walked around like in a daze for a couple of days after that.
And so I guess at the time, like, when like all of a sudden you're crying, you're in this gigantic facility or whatever it is, underground tunnel, mothership, alien mothership, whatever. And then all of a sudden you're not there. You're just in your bed. It's not like you woke up from a dream. It's just like you appeared there. Like,
right. And I wasn't laying down. The next second I'm sitting on the side of my bed, looking out the window. Yeah. And the sun was coming up. I was facing east, which, the sun was coming up. And it was just, and I couldn't tell anybody. I didn't even tell her about that. It was so strange.
And so at the time, you didn't know what to think about it for a long time. And so now you're seeing stuff on the news and you're thinking, there's issues here with the United States and NATO. And all of a sudden you feel like maybe that was a vision of the potential future or the future.
Yeah, it's like a connection was made. I mean, I know back then, I'm sure I'd heard who Donald Trump was, and he becomes president. And now, there's these issues with NATO and NATO and the relationship is not friendly anymore. So I began to think, because at the time, I still thought this was madness. Germany's a NATO ally. And now I see, the NATO alliance and all these issues. So I begin to wonder, how did they know this? How did they foresee, and this was really, how did they foresee this? And what does it mean? And why did you tell me this, show me this? I don't have a podcast. I've never written a book. I'm just a regular guy. I mean, this is is this something that's going to happen or could happen? So then it caused me to think, are these beings from the future? And they're coming back to tell me this is going to happen. And what am I supposed to do? I'm telling you. So perhaps I'm handing you this ball, but I don't know what to do with this.
So how long when you saw this movie, how long was it? Like, did it seem?
Seemed perhaps 10 minutes, because when I first walked up to this viewing form, I actually reached up to touch it because I wanted to see how it was dangling in the air, sitting in the air, and the gray on my right grabbed my arm and pulled it down, and he said, "Don't do that. It would not be good for you," whatever that means.
And did he speak it? Was it telepathic? Was it telepathic messaging?
Oh, yes, all telepathic. I've never seen them move their lips or anything. And
so they move your arm away.
He moved my arm away, and I noticed it was kind of odd at the time that, if another human being grabs your arm, you can feel the life in their hand, fingers. So when he did that, I didn't feel any life in it, and I thought at that time it seemed kind of strange, but then I just let it go. I would have expected to feel, his fingers moving, nothing. So it's kind of odd.
Now, the visuals that were on the screen, like, how realistic did they seem to you? Like compared to what kind of technology that we have then and now, like what kind of technology did this look like to you? Was it 3-dimensional perhaps, or?
Well, it was kind of rudimentary. I mean, especially the aircraft. They were really just silhouettes of aircraft. So I kind of got the impression, and when they were bombing, they were using biological, chemical munitions, which I had trained with the entire time I was in the Marines. The aircraft were just silhouettes of aircraft, that represented aircraft. So I kind of got the impression they created a scenario that I could relate to. I've read that some people see these apocalyptic scenarios and the world ends through pollution. But for me, I know a lot about aviation. I was trained in that field. So I thought maybe they had tailored this for me. But I did ask them a question while that was going on. I asked them, how can you all do all this in the span of a few hours in the night? There was a lot of people there. And I've gotten accustomed to them not responding to you when you ask a question. They just don't respond. So I don't understand that, because I was the only person on that platform. So were they going to show everybody a tailored scenario? And how can this occur in the span of a few hours? I just don't understand.
So and then you saw scenes of destruction. What were the scenes of destruction like? What were you seeing exactly?
I saw they were dropping chemical, biological munitions. So I saw people choking, people dropping dead. I saw birds falling out of the trees. You know, what is the effects of biological and chemical weapons? They weren't using high explosives. They were using biological and chemical munitions. So I saw people choking and dying. It was horrible. It was horrible.
And then it just how did it come to a conclusion? Just saying that this is it, the world is done, and that's it.
Yeah, this what happened. When I was watching the world, it was a view from outer space. I was seeing the earth, and I heard those words. And I'm a Bible Christian, so I say again, I think they created a scenario I could relate to. But as I'm watching the earth, I see these objects coming out of it. And these are people who had died, I guess, during this. And these were Christian people, and they were like lamenting people who had died and who weren't saved. So they put a religious tone to this. But it seemed to me it was done just so I could relate better to it.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
I mean, it is extremely bizarre. And it is really, all my life I've been chasing answers, and I don't have them, even to this day. I just do not understand that. Why are you showing me the end of the world? What am I supposed to do?
And so, then, go ahead.
I'm just saying, so what we're seeing, in the media, what's happening internationally, is actually keeping me up nights sometimes. That this could actually come to fruition.
Now, I'm assuming that after this when we had this dream, I'm sure it rattled you for some period of time, but as the decades rolled by, you were thinking, well, it must have been just some sort of a nothing burger. But now things change, so I'm just
right. And now with all these things going on, because after that, you never put it out of your mind, but I compartment it, get on with my life. I'm a veteran of Desert Storm, so life went on. And the last event was in 2001, and that was on the first time that I can recall. I had a conversation with that gray. That's the one that I'm familiar with. He's always, when they come, he's always there.
And what happened in that incident? What happened in the 2001 incident?
I was in bed with a girlfriend, sleep, and I felt something on my spine. So it made me sit up, and in my bedroom, and because I moved back to the house that I grew up in. My father had passed away. I was selling the house because my mother still lived there. The neighborhood had gotten bad. So I was in the process so I was living there while I was selling the house, which I did. But I wake up, and that gray is standing right in front of me, with about 4 of the smaller grays to his right. And these guys are kind of irritating because the little ones never move. I don't know what the purpose of their presence is. But I look at him and I say, what are you doing? Because he had this device in his hand, and he had been pressing it against my spine. And it looked like, what drummers have, they call it a broom or a sweep. There are wires coming out of it. It didn't hurt. And it kind of had like a small electrical charge. And he said he was checking my energy levels, whatever that means. And that tingling made me sit up. And so he did that, and I'm staring at him, and he's I'm on my bed, but he's standing up. And he looked like at least maybe 6'2", 6'1", 6'2". And he's looking at me, and I said, I know you. And he said, yes. And I said, I've always known you. And he said, yes. And I said, every time you guys have come to me, you've been there. And he said, yes. And I said, even when I was a little boy and you all would come, you were there. And he said, yes. And I said, the first time it happened, you were there. And he said, yes. And I said, just like a friend. And he said, just like a friend.
Wow. And what
And that,
happened?
after that, I mean, when he said that, I was just overcome with emotion, which I couldn't understand. It was like I was talking to my closest brother. And I sat there staring at him for quite, I think perhaps 5 minutes. And he just sat there looking at me. Then the small grays turned and just floated through the window, the door, and floated right out of the room. He turned. He was the last one to leave and floated right through the window and just floated away.
Wow. And
Yeah,
that was the last time,
that was the last time.
25
And
years
that was
ago.
2001. There's been nothing that I know of since then.
And now this. And now all of a sudden, maybe there's purpose behind what happened in 1986.
And I'm trying to understand, what am I supposed to do, if anything, with it? Why would you show me this if there's nothing I'm supposed to do with this information? Who do I tell? Who would believe it?
Yeah. Now I'm going to just be. Well, here's the thing. You know, I believe you, right? I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of other people out there who are going to hear this and they're going to believe you, because there's a lot of people out there who have had encounters with these things, and we know that there's something going on, and we now have evidence that shows that there's something here with us. There's no question about it. And you actually shared a drawing. I'm going to add this to the stage right now. This is when you were in this craft and you're staring at the screen. You can see there's people off to the side, on the left side of the image. That's where there was a bunch of people off to the left, and there was a gray with each one of them, and they were all just like oblivious or staring into oblivion. They just seemed like they were in a trance of some kind. And
Yes.
you were brought in front of this screen and shown these images, and you're the one to the right of the one gray bailing to the left. And then there's other gray beings standing there with you. I wonder, looking at this image and all these other people that were there, I wonder if they were bringing you up one at a time, and maybe even you might have perhaps been one of those people standing off to the side at one point in a trance, completely oblivious to what was going on. Maybe they were bringing these up one at a time to see this. I wonder if there are other people out there that remember something like this. That's just come to my mind just now.
Right. It was very strange. And I mean, I don't understand where I was, but how could you pull this off in the span of a few hours in the night? How is that possible? They brought me back, so I'm assuming these people were allowed to leave later, I would assume.
And you said that how, again, I guess the people, just to let people know how big this was inside. You said it's as big as a football field. It was.
It looked as big as a football field. I was close to the wall on the left, but to the right, I couldn't see where it ended. Straight ahead, it got darker, and I couldn't see where it ended. My impression was it was as large as a football field, and the walls of this place, it looked like it had been hewn out of rock. The sides of the walls that I could see were kind of jagged, uneven, almost as if it was bored through. So I kind of got the impression I must be underground somewhere.
And you don't know how you have no memory of how you got there. There was no craft or anything. You just found yourself.
I don't know how I got there. I mean, 1 second you're sitting on the edge of the bed, and the very next second I'm there.
Wow.
And then, they tell when I get back, start your wife. And I knew what that meant, so I shook her and she got up. So that was odd. That was very odd.
Yes, I'd say so. Very odd. Start your wife like she's some sort of a car or something.
Yeah.
Wow.
So maybe perhaps they had her where she couldn't wake up, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, you hear stories like that. I mean, you hear stories about other people who are not the targets. They're basically shut off like they're a lamp or something. Just turn them off, and they're, they don't even move. They're like frozen in time or something. You read the UFO literature, and that's what you come across. And speaking of that, I mean, at some point, I'm sure in your life, you had to start. You had to become interested in this and start looking more into it. Did you start reading books about this at some point, or?
Well, I started reading everything I could find only to understand what this meant. And the more I read and studied, the more questions I have. I would have hoped by now I'd have some answers, and there's very few. But I've grabbed everything I could to understand what this is. I think when I was in that cavern or whatever it was, I think the grays on my right, because they were looking at my temporal area, I think they were somehow tapping into my emotional response to what I was looking at, if that makes any sense.
Could be, yeah. I mean, who knows? I mean, it could be maybe that maybe they were making sure that you remember it. Maybe they were trying to reinforce this. Maybe they're doing something to that effect. I mean, because here we are, all these years later, talking about what you saw that day, and it's it wasn't until now where you're starting to make a possible connection to that film or movie that they showed you to what's going on today. And it didn't make sense all these years, and now all of a sudden it does. It's starting to, perhaps.
So I'm hoping that there's other people who can add to this mystery and say, probably add a piece to the puzzle. I would like to know what this is all about. I'm not optimistic, but I would like to know.
I'm actually wondering now, like there was other people there, and maybe they were shown the same kinds of things. And then you think about some of the aerial, like for instance, the aerial school incident. All those children were shown images of destruction, and they were warned about technology. Yeah. What was? I mean, it seems like there could be a concern of where we're heading, and what you might have been shown that time, way back in 1986, might have been something that's could happen soon.
Well, I'm telling you. And perhaps your viewers, so perhaps there'll be a connection made. It kind of takes the burden off me somewhat, because I told someone who has a mechanism to share it. So,
yeah. Well, I think this is some amazing information and an amazing story, and hopefully it turns out not to be come reality. I guess that's the only thing we could hope for here, or maybe if the right minds hear what we're talking about here, maybe they'll think twice about trying to cause the end of the beginning. I guess we would be in the beginning of the end of the world right now if that vision that you were shown, that image, the imagery that you were shown was something that is going to come to pass.
Well, I'm confident now at this point. I was not the only one shown that. I am not a known figure. I'm a retired guy, blue collar worker. So there's got to be more people who they shown that to, who may see this and be able to take it a step further.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is an amazing story, Marvin, and I really appreciate you coming on the show today to share this with us. And I am going to get back with you later on today. I'm going to go on. I'm going to try to create some images to go along with some of the descriptions that you provided about this immense cave, and then I will include it in the final podcast version that
I'd like to see them. Yeah,
publish later on today. I will do that. Well, I want to say this, Marvin. Thanks a lot again for coming on the show. I really appreciate it, and we'll see what happens if this goes anywhere, or if maybe it will alert some other people out there who may have had the same experiences, maybe to step forward and share the same kind of story, perhaps.
Thank you very much. Anytime.
All right. I want to say this. I want to say thank you all for joining us here today. Until next time.